Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into the Sports Source. Happy you're joining us. Tennessee's 8-game win streak is no more. They did keep one streak alive, though. They've now lost 34 consecutive games to top 10 teams. Not the way you want to come out of Georgia. They lost 44-21. Those of you familiar with our show over these last 18 years, you know that we've covered a lot of losses. We don't do the funeral where we sit around crying. It's more of an Irish wake. So sit back for the next 90 minutes. We'll break down the game, and we'll try and do it in a way that might raise your spirits a little bit. First segment of our show, we welcome in a brand new sponsor today, the Garza Law Firm. I know you've been seeing a lot of ads out there from out-of-town law firms. They've recently been peppering the market. And you might think, I've never heard of that group before. That's because they're actually located in Chattanooga or Birmingham. But Marcos Garza, he's part of this community. He's a neighbor. He is right here, East Tennessee, right in Knoxville. If you have legal issues, the Garza Law Firm is the team to turn to, garzalaw.com, and we welcome them aboard the Sports Source. All right. Want to welcome in the first wave of panelists. We have another wave waiting to come. VFL Will Overstreet. Who did you pick on Friday on the radio?
Stood too close to Pearl the other day.
Stood too close to Pearl. Took Tennessee last week. All right. Next to you, we did our picks on Jimmy's show. Jimmy Himes from the Sports Animal, Sports Talk, Monday through Friday. You can catch him there 3 to 7 every day. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Right down there, Chuck Cavaleris, the master of the Chucky C-Note Casino.
Yes, sir.
Longtime member of our panel and just a man about town here in Knoxville. Chuck, thanks for joining us. All right, Tennessee had only 2 negative rush plays in the first 2 games. That kind of went out the window yesterday. Play number 1, terrible day. They used the great 7-man jumbo package that everyone went nuts over against Missouri. We now know why. They had to. They needed the 7-man jumbo package against Missouri because they could have put 10 offensive linemen out there against Georgia. It didn't look good yesterday. Offensive line atrocious at Georgia. We'll run through some stats in a minute. Guarantano, not great either. It was a quintessential Guarantano game. Terrific first half, beautiful long balls. Second half, accuracy's gone, turns the ball over. My question for you guys, we'll just keep it simple because I think most of the blame pie is being served up to the quarterback as usual. But I thought the offensive line deserved a chunk too. Let's start with Chuck and work our way this way. Where are you putting the blame? Who gets the biggest slice of blame pie, Guarantano or the offensive line?
It's almost like a buffet of blame pies, isn't it? I think you have to start with the offensive line because if you can't run the ball, if you're Tennessee and you can't run the ball against Georgia, help keep your defense on the field. And then if you can't run the ball, at least you need to be able to pass block. And that was bad. So, I start with the offensive line, and then you can work your way down. There's a lot to go around there.
Jimmy, where are you going, and what were your thoughts on that game?
Offensive line, without a doubt. I was very disappointed. This is an offensive line that Tennessee has rebuilt it. It's supposed to be a strength of the team. You've got 4 5-star guys that start up front. You got a 6th-year senior who's supposed to be a solid player. You got whipped. You got manhandled. You couldn't run it. You couldn't pass protect. I was really surprised at that. I thought Tennessee needed to kind of hang with Georgia in terms of the running game stats. They did not. They didn't come close. The running backs, the 2 good running backs Tennessee had 16 carries for 36 yards. That's it. I thought the offensive line really had a horrible game, and I put most of it on them because I expected more from that group.
Mr. Overstreet.
It definitely goes to the offensive line. It starts there. We talked about it. Tennessee, to win this game, had to have Guarantano 20 passes, maybe 25. But you had to have an offensive line performance that allows you to be in that kind of game, control some of the clock, get some decent run game going. They never did it. And it wasn't just they got whipped, mental mistakes, bust. It was all over the field that they were not ready to play at some point. And, you can give excuses to other sides of the defense and offense, talking about recruiting and all that stuff. You can't with this offensive line. They talked about it all night. That defense for Georgia has 4 and 5 stars. Well, your offensive line has that too. and you're supposed to be able to match up. But mano and mano, you got whipped yesterday. And there's not a single player in that offensive line that I can't say that about.
Yeah, and I think the Guarantano thing, he is what he is.
Right.
And somebody got a little angry with me on Twitter yesterday because I said, look, he's a game manager. You need to be able to run the ball and do other things. He said, we don't want a game manager. That hurts the offense. Well, I understand you don't want that, but that is what it is.
But
I mean, if this offense is going to ask Jarrett Guarantano to throw 30 to 35 times, he's going to have to carry you. Yesterday is what you're going to get. He'll have some ups. He'll have some downs. You're not going to win a lot of big games with that. What you need is an offensive line that can run the football. I thought it was interesting how moods change. I mean, it went from Pruitt's greatest coach of the world. Last year, idiot after Georgia State, win streak, greatest coach of the world. Yesterday, I kept hearing, why didn't we hire Kiffin? After week one, why didn't we hire Lee? But the name that hasn't popped up, David Ubbins said on our show last week, nobody talking about Will Friend now. They were last night. It was back in Will Friend's lap. Let me show you some numbers. These guys haven't seen these either. Ground game route. Tennessee, 27 carries yesterday, -1 yard. That is minus -0.03 yards per attempt. Georgia, 50 carries, 193, 3.86. Okay. But take away the snap-foo, the bad snap, put 30 yards back on there, they average 4.5 yards a carry on you. So that's not great. Next graphic here, what do we got? O-line nightmare. All right, as I mentioned, 27 rushes, -1 yard. Allowed 5 sacks. I saw a number from ESPN this morning that like 9 of Guarantano's 18 second-half dropbacks, there was pressure. I would have thought it was higher than that. How many hits? I do not know. 6 penalties on the O-line for 35 yards, including 5 false start penalties that looked like Georgia's pre-snap movement was getting at them. I heard Tim Irwin on your radio show today say it might have been Georgia mimicking the snap count.
Right.
Okay, so either way, the offensive line had a terrible day, as we mentioned. First down. They had 23 first downs by my count, 118 yards. That's not 5 yards on first down. That's not bad. But they had 3 passes that covered 75 yards of that. The other 20 first downs, 43 yards total, 2 yards per first down. 11 first down rushes, 23 yards. That's not going to get it done. You're winding up in second and third and long, and that's where you get in trouble with Guarantano. And let's talk about high-low Guarantano, because that's what he is. He's got his highs, he's got his lows. 23 of 36, 63%, 215 yards, 2 beautiful touchdowns, 1 horrendous interception when the pressure was in his face and he back-footed a throw. 3 fumbles, 2 of them lost. We'll talk to Sterling Hinton a little later about how many of those strip sacks are on him. 5 sacks. And then, for those of you wanting a quarterback change, because it's being talked about already, Pruitt was asked about it after the game. He said, no, I don't really know where that would have helped. It starts with protection. That's the first thing. And getting guys open. If you can't run the football, you've got a tough day's work. Okay, and then the last thing, yesterday, before the game, Tennessee put out a hype video dubbing their offensive line the Tennessee Valley Authority. I'm going to credit somebody. If you're going with nicknames, one of my Twitter followers suggested another one for the offensive line, the Lookouts, which I thought was rather amusing.
For the minor league baseball team in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you wonder when you look at this offensive line, do you see plenty of guards? Who are your tackles? That's one of the things I kind of wonder, has that been exposed on all of this 5-star talent?
There were, I had some former offensive linemen, Tennessee guys, that commented on Cade May's speed at tackle, that at times he looks slower, looks more like a guard. I had someone else tell me lateral movement on this offensive line is not good at all. Thoughts as a former pass rusher, how do you look at this offensive line?
At the tackles, I'd be excited to go against them. I just frankly see a lot of guys that you could beat your first couple steps off the edge. So for me, as a defensive line, as an outside line, rusher, you're looking at this guy's going, hey, the edge is there. I can get you off the edge. And so I would be excited to play this group back in my day just because I think they are a little bit slow and they would be susceptible to getting off the edge.
Jimmy, this offensive line hasn't looked this bad. The first game against South Carolina, we left that game saying this team looks a lot like last year. Mm-hmm. Against Missouri, all right, offensive line controlled it, ran 50 times, had a good day. Now they look terrible against what is the best defense they're going to face this year? It's hard to imagine anybody better. Mm-hmm. Are we overreacting with this offensive line? Because today, the offensive line is the worst in the league. the reality might be maybe a hair better than last year. Where are you putting this offensive line in terms of last year comparison?
I don't think we're overreacting because I want to see what they do against the best competition, and they failed. So I don't think it's an overreaction. Can you whip Missouri? Yeah. Now, by the way, against Missouri, they still had 18 runs of 3 yards or less in that game, not counting the quarterback sneak.
But the jumbo package.
Yeah, the jumbo package. But they didn't dominate the entire game against Missouri. There were plenty of times when I went back and watched it again, Missouri whipped them up front more than I thought. But still, this offensive line, I judge them based on what you do against the best. And the best is Georgia, and you didn't pass the test. So I don't think it's an overreaction. Now, should you be able to handle Kentucky and Vanderbilt and some of these other teams? Yes. But what are you going to do when you play against Alabama? What are you going to do against Auburn's defensive line? That's what I want to see. But I don't think it's an overreaction to say that this offensive line did a poor job against Georgia, and it creates doubt going forward, in my mind, against some of the better defenses you face.
I guess I'm looking at it as an overall, what am I going to get out of this offensive line? I don't think they're going to run for -1 yards every week, and I think that's kind of the way a lot of people are looking at it, is they're going to win 5 games because of that offensive line. Well, here's the thing. Before the season, I said they'd win 5 games, so I'm not looking at it saying I'm taking off, but we'll get into the projections later.
I still think you have a concern on this offensive line's ability to pass block, because that has shown up in Missouri. It has shown up against South Carolina. They've got weaknesses there. So if you have to get in a 3rd and long, you have a struggle with this offensive line that you have to be ready to stop.
Very good. All right, we'll talk about Jim Chaney's offense, and we'll talk about the defense's day. Was that a good day or a bad day for the defense? How do you grade it? All that next, a lot more coming. Sports Source continues next.